You are listening to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast,
where we talk about fine food and healthy living throughout Asia.
So let's get started. Hey everybody, Ian and Todd here.
Welcome to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast.
If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and show notes are found on our Facebook page.
Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or on my blog, toddinasia.com. That's Todd with 2 D's in Asia.com.
All links are in the show notes. Now, let's get started. With us today is Australian Truffle Traders and owner Gavin Booth, and also my co-host Todd Lennox. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on the show.
No worries.
Hey, Ian. Good to be with you as always. I think it might be good just to start by asking you, what is a truffle?
Truffle is a subterranean fungus. The truffle that we have come to love and eat over the last several thousand years is the fruiting body. So it's a bag of spores that is designed to be found and dug up through its aroma and very unique flavour.
When was it first implemented into cuisine?
Some of the oldest recipes that we have were written by the Greeks, and they have truffle recipes in there, as did the Romans. When you look at, say, the first Christian emperor of Rome, he actually prescribed truffle as an aphrodisiac for people, for ladies who had issues in the bedroom. And I think it was the third Christian emperor of Rome would nail you to a plank of wood if he found you with truffles, because he felt it was the devil's work.
Right.
So
Wow, that's a fascinating history.
It's a very controversial ingredient that has spanned thousands of years.
You're growing truffles or collecting truffles in Australia.
That's right. So we have a farm in a small town called Manjimup, which is in the southwest of Western Australia. It's a very unique location, the southwest corner. I think a lot of people have this idea of Australia with its deserts and red dirt and the like. Whereas actually the southwest corner has massive forests. We're talking forests that are the third largest tree in the world. We're talking forests that have been alive since prehistoric times. So
it's a tingle tree, isn't it?
Yeah, the tingle tree and the karri and jarrahs. And the jarrah trees, the reason why it was exploited by Europeans, a couple hundred years ago, for example, London was paved with the trees, because the jarrah tree is specifically used when it's kept wet. It sets like iron, and they actually paved the streets of London. Canary Wharf and places like that were built out of jarrah. So it's a very unique timber.
How do you farm truffles? What's the process?
Well, the farming of truffles has been done, I don't know if farming's quite the right word to use, plant and hope. Could be another way of reading it. So truffles form a symbiotic relationship with the tree. So back in about 1870, a guy called Joseph Talon in Apt, at the end of the Luberon Valley in Provence, he discovered a way of inoculating trees and planting those trees out into the forest.
What does that mean, inoculating?
Well, as I said before, the truffle is a bag of spores, so it's the reproductive cycle. So we eat the apple, and in the middle of the apple are some pips, and the idea is that those pips grow up into a tree. So it's a reproductive cycle for the apple tree, or a plum stone, peach, whatever you'd like to call it. Truffles are no different. So fungus, when you have a normal mushroom, that mushroom has gills underneath, and if you let it sporulate, it will. Those spores are designed to be wind-borne, and they'll go away. Other funguses are designed to adhere themselves to the coats of animals and get passed on like that and spread around the forest. Truffles are designed through aroma to be dug up, eaten by something with a nose, a shrew or a squirrel, human, a pig, those sorts of animals, and then they go through the intestinal tract and get passed on elsewhere in the forest. So that's how it's evolved. Joseph Talon had this fantastic idea to put it on trees. But one of the things he realised was that when you have a symbiotic relationship, so about 70% of the plant kingdom has a symbiotic relationship with fungus, and it makes it somewhere between sort of 5 to 30% more efficient as a plant. And the reason why it does that is because in the case of a truffle, it adheres itself, this ectomycorrhizae fungus adheres itself to the roots of the tree. And what the tree does is it gives it a safe home, big solid oak tree. It also provides it in times of drought with water from the tap roots, from down deep. But the main feature is probably the fact that through photosynthesis, you actually get carbon turned into sugar through the leaf, and that is the food stuff for the truffle. And interestingly enough, there's a lady, a researcher in, I think it's in Oregon, who has discovered this stuff called glomin, and glomin's one of the highest concentrates of carbon jelly in nature, and it's secreted by truffle. So when the tree is actually bringing in carbon dioxide to turn it into sugar, there is obviously carbon. Wood trees are made out of, it's wood, it's carbon, and the truffle actually exudes into the soil around it. So it's not only just a trunk, but we actually have now found this super intensive carbon gel. And so it's really fascinating stuff, because as far as carbon sequestration goes, we want to try and get that carbon out of the atmosphere back into the trees. Wow. Now, I'll have to be honest, I mean, we do these truffles to eat them and to grow them, and it's obviously supposed to be a profitable business, but it's kind of cool, I was just
It's very cool.
In terms of ecology, sustainability, all that sort of stuff, it's fantastic.
I sat in an aeroplane coming to Singapore last night, and I'm watching Al Gore with his sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, and you sit there and you go, wow, maybe we are trying to maybe we can be a bit smarter and do these things a little bit better.
What a great way to save the planet, eating truffles.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, I'm such a hero.
How did they come to be in Australia?
That's a really interesting story. So probably about 25 years ago, there was a chap in New Zealand, Dr. Ian Hall, and he brought truffles down to New Zealand, and there's over 100 truffiers, which is the French word for truffle orchard or truffle grove. So there's over 100 truffiers planted in New Zealand, and unfortunately, and we don't 100% know why, and nobody does. You said earlier on I was a truffle expert. My number one rule with truffle experts is to completely ignore anything they say as soon as they claim to be an expert, and I do not claim to be an expert. The truth of the matter is, with truffles, we know far less. After 12 years of doing this, I kind of feel as though I'm almost getting to this fuzzy stage in my head where perhaps I'm just starting to form the right questions. My role in this as a grower is to have a bit of respect and understanding for the dirt that's underneath my feet, but it's also to form a team, and perhaps one of the unique parts of our team is this relationship we have to have with our dogs, because we harvest those truffles with the dog, and at the end of the day, dogs are amazingly honest animals.
Yeah.
And if they're not happy, they'll tell you pretty quick. So that relationship between the handler and the dog is a uniquely humbling sort of experience, because I'll tell you now, I've spent times desperate to get truffle out the ground, almost begging and pleading with this animal to go out and work, and she's looking at me going, there's thunder and lightning coming, we ain't going out yet. So you're against it.
I think pigs are used also to find truffles in some places. Is that true?
Well, it's true. There is definitely a historical fact to that, and there are still a few folk that do it, but 99% of the world's truffle is done with the dog.
And do you have to train the dogs, or is it something that comes naturally to them?
No. So it's definitely about training. So the issue is that with a pig, you've got 130 kilos of meat and sinew that wants that truffle kind of probably more than you do. Whereas with the dog, you've got 30 kilos. In the case of a beautiful Labrador, you've got 30 kilos of meat and sinew that wants the treat that you're offering him in return for finding that truffle. So it's it's a different relationship dynamic there. And in France, I actually did meet a guy who's only got 2 fingers left. And he's lost them to the pigs.
Wow.
Yeah, so he actually has lost fingers.
Goodness, trying to pry out that truffle, and the pig goes, nope, I'm having that.
And he lost.
Occupational hazard.
How'd you get work cover to cover that one? Yeah.
Wow. And how long does it take to actually train a dog as well?
It takes about 3-4 weeks to get that initial scent association, as we call it, based very much on Pavlov's theory. And, so you give a positive response, do that. I think he came up with the number 52. In my experience, that varies greatly from dog to dog. You get some fantastically clever dogs that it only takes once or twice, and then you get other dogs that it doesn't seem to matter how many times you do it. So we train the dogs through a series of positive reinforcement. It takes about 3 weeks to get that basic sense association. In my experience, it takes about 3 years to get the full potential. So there's some really fine nuances that you can get with the dog. The dogs can find a truffle, but will they just sit there? Will they scratch next to the truffle so you don't damage the truffle? When you come back and can't find it, will they, come along and show you again? Will they take into consideration that Gavin, the night before, was invited to a fantastic restaurant and probably overindulged, so therefore he needs a bit more patience.
That's a well-trained dog.
But they are traits that you can achieve with that. If you get that team dynamic working, and that's what it's all about. It really is.
Well, I've seen your dogs on, just pictures of them on your website, and they're beautiful dogs, first of all. And it must be so much fun just working out there with them like that.
It is actually, and as we all know, you run a business and you do these things. To go into that environment in the forest with the dog on your own. Hopefully the phone is out of reception, so you've got a valid excuse not to be contactable, and it is. And to this,
what a great business to be out there with your dogs and digging in the dirt. It just sounds so great.
Well, and for me as well, even after a decade, that smell that you get when you dig up that truffle, that I probably shouldn't say this, but the best smell in the world is the dirt that is encapsulated around the truffle.
I can smell it right now.
And when you get that up, and every now and again, probably 1 in 20, 1 in 30, because something people don't know is you will never find 2 truffles that smell the same. They all have a unique aroma to themselves. Some people call it terroir, which I don't think is quite true. You can get general differences from one region to another. There is a level of terroir, but under one tree you can find 2 truffles that smell completely different.
Interesting.
And I would, anybody who wants to come out truffle hunting, come to Management. We do truffle tours, truffle hunts. Chefs are more than welcome if they get the opportunity to step out of the kitchen.
Fantastic.
But so we love hosting people for that, because that experience on the ground is genuinely an experience that I think people remember to their deathbed. So it's one of those things. And I think that's
a very unique experience, because there's plenty of sheep farms, plenty of cattle farms in the world, but there's not so many truffle farms. So listeners, if it's something that interests you, and it certainly does interest me, and when you visit Western Australia, go and see Australian Truffle Traders and check it out.
And you both, as I understand, are setting up some tour possibilities for doing just that. Is that right?
That's right. So we're looking at setting up a degustation tour where you get the opportunity to actually not only taste the West Australian produce, whether it's truffles or yabbies or marron, at one of the restaurants here in Singapore, but then you fly out the next day and then you actually go and see these producers as well. So it's one thing to taste something, but it's another to actually get to see where it comes from.
Wow, that sounds great.
And participate in some of the methods as well. A lot of people probably scratch their heads when they see the price of truffles.
There's no doubt about it. Truffles, up there. Probably often regarded as the 3rd most expensive thing you can eat after caviar and saffron. And the truth of the matter is that they are a primeval flavour. That they are. There's something about truffle. Nothing else comes to it. I'm struggling for words here. So maybe the way I should say this is that with truffle you get a base instinct type of experience, and from that you will then find other things that smell like truffle. But I can tell you now, truffle doesn't smell like anything else. Other things smell like truffle, but it's not a two-way street at all.
It's probably the most unique and special ingredient in a chef's arsenal in a kitchen.
It was definitely up there. And look, it's one ingredient amongst many, and it's a fantastic ingredient when it's used with a bit of time and respect and the like. Now, come back through the process of where that truffle came from, you're actually talking about a 20-year journey. So for us to grow a truffle for a commercial business going into the restaurant trade around the world, we actually started that journey most likely 15 years before with the planting of those trees, which most likely started with 2 or 3 years of ground preparation before that happened. So when I say it's a 20-year journey for us to get that truffle to your plate, I'm not joking. It's actually that kind of a time frame that we're talking about. For the consumer, for the person sat in the restaurant that's enjoying this, I would just encourage them to think of that, just to think of the fact that, you know, it's 2018, so what was I doing in 2008? Oh, hang on a sec. What was I doing? You know,
that's right around when this truffle started.
So it's sort of and really that's the kind of the cycle that we're looking at for an orchard as a whole. Now, obviously, so just to explain that a bit deeper, around about 7 to 8 years, you can expect to find your first truffle. And around about 12 years is when your growth in your truffle production will actually start to get to a stage that is sustainable. So, for example, in year 7, you get 1 truffle. Year 8, you get 2 truffles. And then year 9, you might get 1 kilo of truffles. Year 10, you might get 4 kilos of truffles, 5 kilos, and that's generally how it works, and it builds up. But like the old story goes of the grains of rice on the chessboard, you know, you start with 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, and so on. So it works with truffles. So then once you get up to about year 15 or so, you actually start hitting that commercially sustainable
But if you're interested in becoming a truffle supplier, you can expect a minimum of 7 years before you're even making any return on your investment.
Or you don't make a return on your investment. You're waiting 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah. Because you get 1 truffle.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now what happened to that first one of mine.
You had a pretty good meal.
We did. It was a pretty good night.
I would imagine that was quite a celebration.
With some of the best West Australian sparkling wine money can buy.
There you go. When you harvest, what's the lifespan from that point to where it gets to a restaurant?
When we go and harvest truffles in Western Australia, I'll talk about quite a unique West Australian experience. We have no curfew in our airport, and because of our unique location in the world, we actually allows airlines to come and go from Perth Airport at a very antisocial hour. So a lot of our flights are red-eyes, but what it means is that the airlines land in Europe and North America and the like at times of the day where they're not paying the taxis that they would have to do at 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening. I pick a truffle at 9 a.m. in the morning. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it gets put on the truck. We're 4 hours south of Perth, which is the most remote capital city in the world. Okay? So we are, you know, we've heard of Timbuktu, keep on going. You get to the black stump, a bit further, and you get to us, right? So basically, where we are based, you get this product. It gets put on the truck at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It lands at Perth Airport at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. It gets put on an aeroplane at 11 p.m. It goes to Hong Kong, the Middle East, or to wherever it happens to be going. And generally for Europe, for example, it will land at lunchtime the following day. So we've got truffle that's going from 9 a.m. out of the ground, and it's in London, for example, at 1300 hours the following day, so 1 p.m. Into that's Chicago.
Fresh as you can get.
No. I can do better.
You can do better.
I can do better.
All right.
So into Chicago, we used to fly into a guy in Chicago, and this is the best. And unfortunately, it has changed a little bit with world events and terrorism legislation and like,
Homeland
so we
security.
Can't quite do the same thing. But we used to be able to go to Hong Kong, to Anchorage, to Chicago, and it landed local time at 10 a.m. I would dig truffle up at 9 a.m. on the 1st of the month, and it would land at 10 a.m. on the 1st of the month in Chicago. Wow. And I don't reckon anybody can get it fresher than that. That's about as good as you can get it.
That's as fresh as you can get it. Yeah. Where are you supplying to?
So we supply in through the United States. So we go to New York, Chicago, Seattle, into Florida as well, and San Francisco, another big hub for our truffle. So they're the main sort of areas which sort of match where the main sort of food cultures are in the United States. And then we also go into Asia, so we have markets into Japan and here in Singapore. We're going to be kicking off this year. London is a real promising market for us. We do very well in the UK and into France. France is our largest market.
Wow, that's great.
Wow,
that's
really? That's ironic, isn't it?
Something about ice and Eskimos in there.
Yeah.
But it's a real endorsement of our product. I mean, I have this wonderful lady in France that I deal with, and she's a very, very passionate lady. And she rings me up, she goes, "Gavin, the truffles, they are beautiful." And she just says it with this range of emotions on the phone. And my wife overhears the message, when we're driving the car. She looks at me as though I'm having an affair or something.
Is there an appreciable difference between a French truffle and an Australian truffle?
Look, there are differences. A lot of French people say that ours is every bit as good, if not better.
I would say that's very magnanimous of the French to say.
And to be honest with you, I was gobsmacked. We're not talking about, a French chef somewhere. We're talking about people that kind of really eat, live and breathe this business. The truth of the matter is that everywhere in the world has a capacity to be able to grow wonderful truffle or terrible truffle. But one of the things that West Australian truffle seems to have that is quite unique is an absolute pristineness about it. It's clean. It's very, very clean.
So speaking of it being a clean product, what are the health benefits of truffles? Are there any?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of points to be made on that. Truffles are extremely healthy. All fungus is healthy. They are high in minerals, they are high in vitamins, however you wish to say it, and they're exceptionally healthy. One point I would like to make, though, if you feel that you can consume a quantity of truffle that would allow you to actually see real health benefits from it, I'm your new best friend, because, let's be honest, you'd be chewing through half a kilo a day or whatever.
That's a little pricey.
Yeah. So the truth of the matter is that they're exceptionally healthy products. One thing that they do say about truffle is that they're an aphrodisiac. There was a young man in London. I've got to tell you the story. It's awesome. I love it. There was a young man in London who got patronage from the Royal Society. And to give you an idea, the Royal Society is, we're talking guys like Sir Christopher Wren, Joseph Banks, Darwin, David Attenborough. So, we're talking a bit of the who's who of the natural history world. And the Royal Society was set up to basically further, through private money, it was set up to further scientific research. And it still does it today, does an amazing job today, but it's the original institution that did so. Sent people like Captain Cook to go off around the world and, look at the transit of Venus, which turned into discovering places like Australia. Mm-hmm. So when all of this happened, the Royal Society, they gave patronage to a young man, and his thesis, I suppose you'd say, was to go and find out whether truffles were truly an aphrodisiac. And apparently he was a pretty attractive young fella.
Sounds like an interesting study.
No, let's just wind that forward. So just imagine we're sat here in Singapore and we've gone up to one of the senior executives of an Intel company here or a tech company and said, "Look, I want to go and look at, could you imagine the skills of his description writing to be able to get this one to fly?"
Yeah.
It's great. It's just wonderful.
There's a grant writer I would hire.
Yeah, exactly. So they said yes. So he went off to France. He got given money for 6 months to go to France and to discover whether truffles were an aphrodisiac. No, I haven't read the scientific method behind this, but good on him. So off he goes. And after 6 months, he wrote a letter back to the Royal Society, and it went along the lines of, "I'm doing really good work here. I need more money." And they said yes. So he got an extension to his research project. So
this guy has got it made.
Yeah. So this young fella, and you've just got this image of the cane and the top hat and, sort of the Phileas Fogg sort of looking guy. And so off he gets sent some more money in France. And he comes back And again, I've got this Phileas Fogg thing, but maybe his collar's sticking out now and he looks a little bit dishevelled. Turns back up in London, and he goes in, and the line that he gave that I love is and he gave this scientific report to the aphrodisiac and said, whilst I cannot truly say that truffles are an aphrodisiac, what I can say is that for the expense and effort of such a fine meal, it doth make men more tender of heart and women more amiable to advance. So,
what a great story. That is wonderful.
The reason why they say it's an aphrodisiac is because, and there is some science to this, it's not a true aphrodisiac. So we know that. However, what it does is it exudes a hormone that is exuded by animals as part of the mating cycle. And this hormone is designed, and it's picked up by female receptors, or people who are receptive to this. As we know, there's a spectrum for these things. So it's picked up by these receptors, and what it does is it makes people more comfortable. It actually makes people feel secure. And so in the case of pigs, as an example, it's exuded by the male pig through the tusk, glands underneath the tusk. And when they rub that around in an area, it makes the female feel a bit more secure that he's within his territory. In human beings, it's exuded by males in our armpits.
Oh, wow.
So when you go for a cuddle and she snuggles up for a bit of a cuddle, it's said that that is the hormone that has been received.
My wife would kill me if I did that. In the tropics, I sweat so much that I probably go through 2 deodorant cans a week.
Well,
the answer is just eat truffles and then sweat, and you'll be all set.
So the aroma that's given off by the truffle, and it's been described famously in literature as an aroma described as somewhere between sweaty socks and sex. There's one writing iteration of it. It really has sort of captivated the imagination. And again, it's that base aroma. It's something that hits you deep down in your chest. It's not something that can be described.
Very primal by the sound of it.
Primal is exactly the phrase. It does have health benefits. It does have other attractions. And I've taken thousands of people out to find their first truffle. I have taken hundreds of people out who have never ever smelt a truffle before. And for a section of the community, both male and female, it has a physiological effect. And that physiological effect varies, but I can say this, I'll very quick story is a young couple turned up for a truffle hunt at a property that I used to work in Manjimup, and they were both looking out opposite windows when they turned up in the hire car. They'd clearly, he was driving, she was reading the map. Perhaps the map was upside down or something, I don't know. But there'd been some fireworks in that car. There'd been some, a few storm clouds in that car on the way in. It was clear and pretty evident from the body language. Yeah. By the end of the truffle hunt and getting down and smelling all that, you couldn't see daylight between the couple. Wow. So there's definitely something to it.
There you go, listeners. If you want to get closer to your wife, take her on a truffle hunt.
To me, it seems like there's a sort of spiritual nature to truffles.
There is. Well, there's a spiritual nature to all food. It's just some of it we do it just to keep us going. It's a form of energy. There's certain foods that we will all buy and will go to great effort to do. Yeah. Truffle is one of those.
Almost sacred.
Exactly, and we all have different ones. I mean, it's part of our unique human nature. We all have those special little things that awaken a memory or a place. And what can I say? It's just good.
If our listeners are interested, or any chefs that are listening and getting some truffles from you, how best they get in contact with you?
Australian Truffle Traders. Give us a Google. Give me a call. It's got my direct number and email on there. You'll be talking to me. We're a very small family business, so we're not a huge multinational. Small family Australian-owned business. So give me a shout, and we have a range of distributors all across the globe, and it's my job to get them to you.
What's the best way to prepare truffle, or how do some of the chefs like to prepare their truffle?
It's very diverse. It's really comes down to the individual chef. But like here today at Gala Prado here in Singapore, Chef Lino was talking just before and talking about, for him, what he finds very important in his preparation is making sure that there's sort of 3-4 grams of truffle that go onto every portion, which is music to my ears because I grow truffles. But so certainly, that other chefs, you can see they have a real philosophy about the time and planning for their dish. With Chef Lino here, he was talking about the volume. Another guy I know in Hokkaido, Shinichi Maeda, he really believes in time. It's all about how do we get the infusion process going. So he will start his idea in a truffle dish a week before you're going to eat it. And so it's an infusion process. So he'll make something like a chawanmushi, like a marin chawanmushi. It's a classic sort of West Australian Japanese fusion dish. And he'll start infusing the eggs that go into that curd. And this is a great way for people who want to use truffle at home as well. If you get something that people don't realise, if you get a dozen eggs in the shell, put it in an airtight container with a tea towel or kitchen towel, and put the truffle on top, wrapped in some tea towel or kitchen towel, and keep it airtight. Those eggs, in a period of 2 or 3 days, will infuse to the point that if you were to soft boil those eggs, 63 degrees those eggs, or even just crack them and make an omelette, will taste and smell wonderfully of truffle.
No kidding.
The eggshell is semi-permeable. It's a semi-permeable membrane, so it brings in the air, the outside atmosphere. And of course, when you encapsulate that truffle, and this is a really good storage tip. So if you get the truffle home or in the restaurant, you put a bit in there. What kills truffle is no air. So they call it hypoxic. When it goes hypoxic, so it drones or it gets completely done with carbon dioxide. So opening and closing and checking that truffle. And the other thing that will kill a truffle is water. So what I always do is I never put truffles on the bottom layer. I put them on the top in an airtight container. It loves its own sort of smell, so it seems to respond well to an enclosed. And when you think about it, when it's down sort of 8 inches underground, it's encapsulated by that dirt. And when you think about that process, just imagine, if you will, being a truffle in the ground. You cannot respire the same. So the carbon dioxide to oxygen levels are different to what they are on the surface. So it's a higher carbon dioxide, less oxygen, but still there's some oxygen, there's still some respiration that's going on. It's cool, so it's probably, in wintertime, 4-5 degrees. That's perfect.
Yeah.
It's dark, but it's encapsulated. So one of the things I noticed, that if you put a truffle open in the fridge, you pick it up, it just doesn't seem to smell. If you get that truffle and put it in a container and keep it kind of dry, it absolutely will build up its aroma and stink. When you open that fridge door, you're like, wow, what was that?
Yeah.
And everybody in the house knows you've got a truffle in the fridge, sort of thing. The other side of it is, and this is where Chef Lino, where his words today was just really educational for me, was if you buy a 20-gram truffle and put it in the fridge, you're going to struggle to get too much out of that. And you're almost better off getting 50-gram truffle, but having several meals out of that one truffle, sort of,
right.
because you've actually got an amount of truffle that will give you that flavour, will give you that. So it's definitely people go out and they go, I'll have $10 worth of truffle, please, and you're like, all right, okay, well you just
that's not going to do it. Yeah.
So buy some truffle. I know I'm going to say this because I grow truffles, so I of course am encouraging people to use it at home, but genuinely to have that good experience. So as Chef Lino has said here at Gala Prado, you really need some volume about it. Invite more friends in.
Thank you for participating in our podcast.
If anybody happened to get the chance, go and visit them in Australia. Otherwise, if you're looking for truffle as well, always get in touch with me, Australian Gourmet and Seafood, and we can certainly get some product out to you via Australian Truffle Traders.
All right, very good.
If you're enjoying the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast, please consider supporting us by going to our homepage at www.finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com and making a donation.
We are beginning a new way to support the show by subscribing as a loyal member, another option on our homepage at finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com. There are options to choose for the level of support you wish to give.
We will always make our podcasts available for free and appreciate your patronage to be able to do so.
If you subscribe with iTunes, please remember to give us a 5-star rating. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and then give us a 5-star rating. For other subscribers on Google Play, Spotify, or any other aggregators, please rate us there. Once again, thank you for listening to the show.